So I know we're in the middle of the series right now, but we're going to take a break today to discuss some things that we need to go over in preparation for our meeting after and the chili dinner. So we're going to take a break from the series today, and we'll get back into it next week. So I've been reading about the story of Joseph, and I was trying to get a framework for which we can kind of understand the context of where we're sitting today and how I can kind of best explain this. So I want to spend about 20 minutes here in Genesis 37 through 41. And I'm not going to read the whole thing to you. In fact, I'm just going to tell you the story. The story begins with Jacob. Jacob, we know him better as Israel. He has 12 sons and he has a favorite. And I know that many of us think that we're not supposed to have a favorite, but he had a favorite. And it wasn't the oldest, it was the youngest. It was Joseph. He was 17 years old and he was hated by his brothers. Guess why? He was Dad's favorite. And if you remember maybe growing up in Sunday school or maybe in some of your devotions that he had the coat of many colors, right? And we really don't know if it was like a long sleeve or a short sleeve coat, but we know that it was colorful, right? It was this ornamental robe that signified that Joseph had a special place with Dad. Now, to make matters worse, Joseph wasn't just special to Dad, he was special to God too. Joseph had two separate dreams, all right? Both in Genesis 37, if you want to go and read them. Both of these dreams he explained to his brothers. So he's like, hey guys, gather around, okay? Listen to this one, all right? One day, you're all going to bow down to me because I'm going to be so great. Isn't that awesome? And they're like, yeah, they're like, we hate you. We actually hate you. I mean, maybe it's just me, but I'm thinking there might have been a better way to share that, right? Or maybe just keep it to yourself. I don't know. Maybe Joseph just couldn't read the room. So they're out in the field one day working, and Dad sends Joseph to go and check on his brothers to make sure they're doing what they're supposed to be doing. He's like that sister some of us had, you know, that like to get us into trouble. And they see him coming, and so they start plotting to kill him. One of the brothers talks him into just throwing him into this dried up cistern where they would store water. And so they put him in there, and they're still talking about how are we going to kill Joseph, right? Well, another brother's like, you know, I got to rescue my brother here. I got to do something, right? So he goes, how about this? He's trying to save him. How about we sell him? Let's just sell him. And so they sell him, right? They sell him into slavery for 20 pieces of silver. I mean, that's pretty crazy, right? But that's not even the craziest thing that happens to Joseph. After they sell him, in the development of this story, somewhere along the way, he becomes a house slave to one of Pharaoh's high officials, the captain of the guard. And he's doing this, he's serving, right? And God is just blessing whatever Joseph touches. God just makes it multiply. And the master of his, Potiphar, he realizes this. So he puts Joseph like in charge of everything. And God just makes his whole house prosper, maybe to a bad extent, because then Potiphar's wife's like, hey, Joseph, he's the younger guy in the house, right? And she's trying to get with him, if you know what I mean. And he's like, nope. So long story short, she accuses him of something he didn't do. And he's thrown into prison, all right? So 13 years from when he was sold into slavery have gone by. So we're going to jump to chapter 41. So if you want, you can turn in your pages or try to read along with the story. I've left out so much, and I'm going to leave out so much more. So please, when we're done here today, go back and read the story. It is a very cool story. Pharaoh, the king, which if you know anything about Egyptian history, Pharaoh was worshipped as though he were a god. In fact, he claimed to be God, right? I think that's kind of interesting. And so Pharaoh one night, he has these two bad dreams, all right? And apparently he'd never had a bad dream before, right? Because we have a bad dream, we wake up, we shake it off, and we just go back to sleep. Well, he has a bad dream and he can't sleep, right? So this man, who's supposed to be God, is disturbed to the extent that he's asking everyone. He kind of goes and he gets all his magicians and his wizards and all that, whatever, and so he wants them to come to him and explain to him what these dreams meant. Nobody, not one free person could explain what these dreams meant. But as it would happen, there was some officials who were there that were in prison with Joseph. And one of them was there, and he's like, maybe I should tell the king that there is a guy, but he's in prison. So he tells them. So they send for Joseph, and they have him shaved and whatever, and get him all cleaned up. They bring him before Pharaoh, and Pharaoh explains to him these dreams. And Joseph says, I can't tell you what they mean, but God can through me, all right? And so he explains to Pharaoh what these dreams meant. So you guys know the story, right? 7 cows and 7 heads of grain. 7 years of what was coming is what Joseph would explain, right? And he says the economy is going to crash, all right? But before it does, there's going to be 7 years of prosperity. We're going to have extra. And so he's telling what God's telling him to do, right? In the 7 years of plenty, you're going to store up. You're going to carve out 20% off the top every year, right? Put it aside for the 7 years are coming that are going to be really, really bad. So Pharaoh's like, okay. And Joseph goes, by the way, you need to appoint somebody to make sure all of this happens. If you know the story, you know that what Pharaoh did. Pharaoh's like, well, who's wiser than you? You got the Spirit of God in you, and he's revealing all this stuff. So I'm going to put you in charge, Joseph. So Joseph spent 13 years in misery, all this time, sold into slavery, house slave, in prison, now raised to the second highest, most powerful position in all the land. He's second only to Pharaoh. So Pharaoh's number 1, he's got the throne, and Joseph is number 2. It says, so Pharaoh said to Joseph, since God has made all this known to you, there is no one as intelligent and wise as you are. You will be over my house, and all my people will obey your commands. Only with regard to the throne will I be greater than you. Pharaoh also said to Joseph, see, I am placing you over all the land of Egypt. Now, guess who's part of all that land? His brothers. Yeah. So the day comes, if you know the story, that Joseph's brothers actually do bow down, just as God told Joseph that they would. So if we jump ahead to chapter 42, it says, the sons of Israel were among those who came to buy grain for the famine was in the land of Canaan. Joseph was in charge of all the country. He sold grain to all its people. His brothers came and bowed down before him with their faces to the ground. But again, I've left so much out, all right? But I want to kind of help us kind of understand where we're at today and kind of unpack this with what we are looking at. There's so many rich lessons in here. And there's just a couple that I want to go over this morning. So let's work some of this out. So my question to you is this. Who brings the seasons that we enjoy? Who's been enjoying the ice and the sub-zero temperatures out there? Yeah, I didn't think so. The seasons, though. Who's in charge of the snow? God. Yeah. Who's in charge of the rain? God. Who's in charge of the storms? God. Yeah. Who's in charge of those wonderful, blissful beaches that some of you like to go in and vacation at? Yeah, can we all agree on that? Yeah, God is sovereign, right? He's sovereign over all his creation. He's in charge. God is the boss. And here's what's interesting. Step back is never like explicitly said in the text, but let's take a step back and look at Genesis 41 and 42. Joseph goes to the most powerful man in the known world at the time. And he says this is so bold. This guy who's supposed to be God, right? Who in his kingdom is worshiped like he's a god. And Joseph, this prisoner who's had it pretty rough for 13 years, is now going to tell the most powerful guy in the land what to do. Think about that for a second. He tells Pharaoh in verse 32, the reason the dream was given to Pharaoh in 2 forms is that the matter has been firmly decided by God. In other words, he's saying to Pharaoh, you're not him. Ouch, right? And he says, God's going to do it soon. And we're not really told why, but the God who controls everything had made up his mind, and he wasn't going to change it. That's what he's telling Pharaoh. And he's telling him, you would be wise to do what God says for you to do. And I want us to understand this because I think today we kind of have a disconnect on this. There are some things that we're going to face individually and that we're going to face together that you cannot pray away. Read the story. And I want you to come back here next week. And I want you to tell me if you see anywhere in there that they are ever told to pray. Pray that God might change his mind. Just going to save you some time. But feel free to probably prove me wrong, but it's not there. He doesn't ever say that in this story. It's not there. They were told what was coming with certainty. And they were also told what the remedy was. In other words, the trouble or nightmare isn't the one that Pharaoh had. The real nightmare is if you don't do what the God of heaven says to do. I think there's a lot for us to learn there. Again, if you want to know where it says 20%, that's in Genesis 41:34. It's right there in that verse, 20% off the top. And again, understand this. They were not told to pray, all right? They were told to what? Prepare, right? So that means work. And we don't like that word, you know? Especially in today's society. It's like, I don't know, man. I mean, work just, whew, it's just a lot, you know? It's kind of too much. I'm tired. I don't feel like it. That's people's attitude towards work today. But again, he says work, prepare, action, right? Do something. We call it another word, obedience, right? Why? Because God's God. He alone is Lord. Pharaoh, he's about to learn you're not in charge, right? Joseph's God is the one who is. And they were told to act in obedience. I think sometimes we play this little game with God. You know, I've done this. I'm sure many of you have done this. I watch Christians just hide behind their prayer. There's some situation that they're facing, you know, and they have to make a decision and do something that they don't want to do. So you know what they do? They pray. But they don't pray for strength. They don't pray for courage. They don't pray that they would just obey. They pray that God would change his mind. Think about it. They pray that God would do it another way than the way that he's already revealed. That's called selective obedience. We know what God has said, but do we fully obey? Think about King Saul. Remember that when we talked about him last year when we were talking about selective obedience? Totally different place, different situation, but it's the same game, all right? What's that saying? Play stupid games, win stupid prizes, right? King Saul, he was told in 1 Samuel 15 to go and wipe out the Amalekites, even the animals, everything. I want it all gone. Remember what he did? It says Samuel came to him. Saul said, "May the Lord bless you. I have carried out the Lord's instructions." Samuel replied, "Then what is this sound of sheep and cattle I hear?" Saul answered, "The troops brought them from the Amalekites and spared the best sheep and cattle in order to offer sacrifice to the Lord your God. But the rest we destroyed." And that wasn't even true. All right? Samuel says, "Did you fully obey the Lord?" And King Saul's like, "Yeah, I did, of course." Right? Yeah. And Samuel goes, "Why do I hear sheep?" Oh, those animals. Yeah, so I was gonna sacrifice those to God, you know? I mean, he's hiding behind this ritual. We never do that, right? Never. He's hiding behind this ritual to say, I was going to give those to God. Sorry, I kind of forgot. You know, I mean, so first he didn't obey God, and then he lied about it. Here's a lesson. The reason you're being removed as king and stripped of your position, stripped of your power, stripped of your peace, stripped of your promise is because you didn't obey. Understand this, the Bible isn't saying that we shouldn't sacrifice. The Bible isn't saying that we shouldn't pray. But when God's not clear, you should pray. But when the instruction is clear, you don't need to pray. We find ourselves playing this game with God, you know, and you see this pattern over and over in Scripture, right? What about Noah? Let's talk about Noah for a second. God told Noah what was coming, right? He told Noah to prepare. And he gave Noah time to prepare. And because he did, Noah and his family, they all survived. He warned them and they obeyed, right? And think about this hypothetically, not us, because I know that we would never not obey, all right? So what do you suppose would have happened if they hadn't? You know, I've seen example after example in the Bible and even today of people just not obeying the Lord. But what do you think would have happened to Noah? What do you think would have happened to Pharaoh and the Egyptians? Yeah. Yeah. The Pharaoh and the Egyptians and Joseph and his family, all that. Had they not obeyed the Lord and instead they prayed, you know, what would have happened? Let's just suppose they said, you know, God, I'm just going to kind of wait on you. God, I mean, I know and I see the problem, but I'm going to try to pray it away. Is that okay? And so they wait. And I know a lot of people doing this, by the way. They're sitting at this crossroads, right? A decision, a tough decision that they have to make. But they don't want to go in that direction, right? Because they're afraid of what it's going to cost them. Not realizing that it's going to cost you more if you don't. Ever been there? It happens when people don't realize as they're waiting on God, God is waiting on you. Anybody? Warning and all, but I'm just going to pray. If Noah said, I'm not going to build a boat, I'm just going to pray. You think it would have been a good ending? Absolutely not. For him and his family, no way. And oh yeah, I'm leaving all my stuff behind too. I'm leaving all my stuff. It's going to cost me so much to obey God. But you've got to make a decision, and you don't look back. How many of you are sitting right now at that crossroads, and you're just waiting? I do want to look back for a second, though, to Joseph and his brothers for a moment. Remember the ones who hated him and wanted to kill him, all right? I love this. And this is another one of those lessons, okay? After they bowed to Joseph, Joseph recognizes them, but they don't recognize Joseph. And for the next 3 chapters there's this back and forth, right, between Joseph and his brothers, almost as if he's still messing with them. But at least this time he's blessing them while he's doing it. But he's not messing with them, he's testing them to see if they're going to obey him. Now remember, during all of this, his brothers, they don't know who they're actually talking to. They don't know who this is. And finally, Joseph can't take it anymore, all right? It says, then Joseph said to his brothers, please come near me. And they came near. I am Joseph, the one you sold into Egypt. And now don't be worried or angry with yourselves for selling me here, because God sent me ahead of you to preserve life. Sometimes we're in this place, and it's so hard. And we're like, God, why? Why is this happening? Why do I have to go through this? Can't you do something about it? God's got a plan, but you have to obey. So God put Joseph in this place because he was faithful. And now he's testing his brothers, and they passed all the tests that Joseph gave to them. Why? Because they obeyed. If we back up just a little bit, it says, no one was with him when he revealed his identity to his brothers, but he wept so loudly that the Egyptians heard it, and also Pharaoh's household heard it. This guy had a great connection with God, but all at once, he's realizing that vision that he gave me when I was 17, it was for now, in this moment when they would bow down to me. And yes, they intended evil for me. And yes, they wanted to harm me. And yes, they wanted to kill me. But God was at work. Yes, they sold me into slavery. Yes, they made me a slave to Potiphar. And I never would have been falsely accused of what I didn't do. And I would have never been thrown into prison. And tears are just streaming down his face. And had I not gone to prison, I never would have met the king's officials so that I could have interpreted their dreams for them and that one of them would remember me when Pharaoh needed his dreams interpreted. Had none of that ever happened, Joseph and his brothers would have all perished. We know that God causes all things to work for good. For 13 years of misery, we have zero indication that Joseph was ever unfaithful to God. We complain about a week of suffering or 6 months of suffering. 13 years. And I got to ask myself, when I'm going through hard times, do I have the frame of mind to understand that I say I believe these things, I say I know what the scriptures say, but do I believe them? Do I live them? To the extent that when it happens, when the evil that's being plotted against me, I know that eventually, if I obey, do I know this, that eventually if I obey, that God will accomplish what he intended? Romans 8:28, it says, and we know that in all things God works for the good of those who love him, who have been called according to his purpose. He's not abandoned us. He has a plan for us, a purpose for some of the toughest seasons of your life. God is working for the good. And so James tells us to rejoice when we face trials of many kinds. We find that in James chapter 1. The only way you're going to rejoice is if you know this. Jesus said this, in this world you will have trouble. But would you say this next part with me? But take heart, I have overcome the world. Here's my question to you today. Do you believe that? That you can have prosperity in the midst of the storm? If we believe this, then you already know this, so this next part of what I got to say today is going to be easy. If you don't believe this, You're going to be like, well, they weren't told to pray, they were told to prepare. But what that also means is they were also not told to, and some of you need to hear this, they were not told to worry. We are never told to worry, but instead to be glad as we obey God. He's told you what's coming. He's always told us what's coming. And he's always faithful to do everything he's promised. The only question mark ever in any story that we look at in the Bible or in the story of our own lives, the only question, the only person that you should be concerned about is you, not God. God never fails. You know who does? Go ahead and point at yourself. Yeah, we fail ourselves just about every time. And this next part is going to be hard, but we have to talk about this. The American church is in trouble. Did you know that? According to Axios, 15,000 churches are believed to have closed in 2025 in America. 15,000. Do you know why? That's part of it. The finances aren't there. So these churches, they start making cuts in their programming. Well, the result of that is attendance starts to decline. And the result of that is that, okay, what days are we going to keep the heat on in the building? I know a church right now that only keeps the heat on in their building during the week, or on Sundays. During the week, they have staff there, but they're cold, all right? And then pretty soon what happens after that? They're going to lose their preacher because they can't afford to pay him. And these organizations are telling us this not so that we freak out, but so that we can act, so that we can prepare. And I'm telling you, although we're not there yet, we're not real far off. What the leadership here believe is that we got a shot. We believe we've got a chance. But listen to me, trouble is ahead. We do have some problems, and we'll discuss them real fast here. Last year, our budget for 2025 to pay the everyday expenses of the church. That means lease, insurance, building upkeep and maintenance, electric, so that means the lights and the sound system, the heat, the HVAC, then we got gas, trash, water, sewer lines, phone lines, alarm system, fire system, elevator, internet, and I'm probably leaving, that's a long list, and I know I'm leaving stuff out. But you don't turn those things off without closing the building, all right? So let me just make this simple. This is in your bulletin every single week. Last year, our weekly need was $5,213. Our weekly giving averaged roughly $4,200. This year, we've made quite a few cuts to compensate for what we're missing, all right? But even with those cuts, our monthly giving goal based upon last year's budget is still a little bit more. Not much, we're talking a few $100s from last year. With unexpected expenses and things, we have plenty of those. Listen, we have an aging facility, all right? We do. Last year we had an AC unit go out, all right? And then after that, some raccoons decided, hey, I know where a good home would be. So they went in there and they made their home and they messed up all the components and destroyed that. And so that AC unit had to be repaired. And then we had to pay to have the raccoons removed. The hot water heater needed replaced. And then the elevator broke. Right? So, that stuff's going to happen, okay? And we can't predict those things. And that accounts for about over $20,000 that we didn't account for last year. So right now, we're stable, all right? But right now, our monthly giving goal is somewhere around $21,000. And that's just to keep our head above water. And we're still not meeting that. So we've had to take a hard look at our giving. And then in turn, our support that we can offer others to help build the kingdom. But unfortunately, what's happened is that we have our missions competing with our general fund. They become competing entities within the church, when in reality, the idea was they were supposed to be working together, okay? Somewhere along the way, the focus became a little blurry. So let me clarify. Missions were supposed to be above and beyond your normal giving, okay? And so you would give to your home church first. And then you would set aside what money you could give extra each year to missions. So what's happened over time is that people have decided that they're going to only give to missions or certain areas, that they're going to designate that money instead of just giving it to the general budget and letting the leadership decide where that money should be spent. So let me try to explain this, all right? If you give to the church's general budget, do you know what will still be here? The church and missions and everything else we support, right? If you decided that you wanted to designate your money that only goes to, let's just use missions as an example, so that we can only use that money for missions. We can't use it for anything else. So if you only do that, you know what won't be here? The church. And so you'll have to find some other way to give to those missions that you want to support, because we won't be here. And for 2026, the missions committee, along with the leadership, we've decided that we're going to cut our missions giving in half. Hopefully, this is just a temporary thing, but the reality is, if we can't pay the bills, we can't give to missions, okay? And we're gonna go over all this after the service, so this is really just kind of a heads up and hopefully a wake-up call. In this organization, it said a lot of churches are one roof repair away. It's like, wow. Churches are one roof or one heater going out away from going under. And you're like, what? One major disaster that's not covered by insurance. Uh-oh. And I know this isn't a pleasant thing to think about. Some of you probably had no idea. And I know that nobody wants to hear this, and I know that I don't want to be saying it. But I do know this. God's God. And I get to be Joseph today. So you get the people that get to hear it, right? And I'm asking you, what are we going to do? I know what I'm going to do. I'm going to do the whole Joshua thing. As for me and my household, we're going to serve the Lord. We're going to be faithful. I believe I know how you're going to answer. And that's why this next thing will be easy. We're going to be faithful. It's possible, but there's no such thing as magic money, okay? What do I mean by that? I mean, if you put $10 in the offering tray, God's not going to multiply that by 1,000. If he were to do that, the government would come after me, and I need a really good attorney, all right? That's called counterfeiting. We can't do that, all right? The way that this has always worked from the beginning is that God's people tithe, all right? That's God's order. And if we do this God's way, guess what? This problem we're having, it goes away overnight, literally overnight. And I know that we're stretched, and I know that we're pinching, everybody's feeling it. And we don't want anyone to go under. But here's the truth. This isn't really about stress. It's about priority, okay? In every household, there's a first check, right? The first thing that gets paid. And everything else fights for what's left over, right? Most people don't decide not to give to God. They just wait too long. And by the time they get to him, there's really nothing left to offer God. Scripture doesn't say give God what's left. It says honor the Lord with your first fruits. Not what's convenient, not what's left over, the first. Jesus said it plainly, where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. If you want to know what you truly value, don't look at what you say. Look at where your money goes first. God asks for 10%. Not because he needs it, but because he knows what it does in us. So you need to ask yourself, is he worth it? If we do this God's way, this gets easier. If we don't do it God's way, this gets harder. This isn't about me. This isn't about today. This is about whether we will trust God's order or try to keep making our own way. I believe that we want to be faithful. I really do. The question isn't what we believe. The question is what will we do first? I believe we as a church will be faithful to God. I do. But you have to decide. Are we going to obey? I know today was mostly kind of a long ramble about Joseph and everything, but listen, Joseph was faithful because he decided to obey God. Some of you are sitting here today, you know what you should be doing. You know what you should do. You haven't done it yet. You're sitting there wrestling with this decision to give your life to the Lord. I know we're talking about money and uncomfortable things, and if today's the day that God is pulling on your heart to give your life to the Lord, maybe it's time to consider it. Would you stand with me as we close in prayer? Dear God, Lord, we thank you so much for this time we've had to come together. We thank you for the blessings that you bestow upon us, even the ones we take for granted and don't really even think about, God. You've given us so much to be thankful for. And God, I pray that we would respond and give back to you, whether it's giving our life to Christ and fully obeying him, being buried in the waters of baptism, or whether it's tithing our 10% to make sure that we still have a church building that we can meet in and serve you and bring people to you to build the kingdom here on earth. Or if it's both, God, I pray that you would impress it upon our hearts. In Jesus' name I pray, amen.